So people say the church is much more than Sundays, but what are you supposed to do the rest of the week? We're doing this series called Stop Going to Church. Check it out. When I was 15 years old, I started playing guitar. And I think the name of the guitar was Gremlin. Like, it was really, really bad. It was like $30. The neck was as big as a baseball bat, I think, barrel. And it was just really hard to play. I actually remember my fingertips bleeding the first few months when I started playing guitar. It was just overall, probably should not have been a good experience. However, playing guitar has been such a significant part of my life. I mean, my adult life. I play the guitar a lot at our church, and I get to do that for work even now. And I get to play out with a buddy of mine. And even as in high school, me and my friends, we would play together. And playing guitar really shaped my childhood, or I guess my teenage years, pretty profoundly. I remember, I learned to play guitar, and if I met you sometime, or if I interacted with you at any point, you were going to hear about the most recent song that I learned. And if I had my guitar around, I probably would have played it for you. It's kind of how that was. It was just in what I did. In fact, it ruled my schedule. I remember everybody be out doing their things and hanging out with their friends, and I'd be at home in my bedroom playing guitar. It's just what I did because I was so fascinated with it. It took me over in every way, and I could figure it out. And if I'm being honest, I had a knack for it. I'm not the best guitar player in the world. However, I genuinely love it with every part of my being. Dave Matthews, I was a huge Dave Matthews fan, and I know I'm an old dork, I get that, and that's fine. John Mayer came along, and those guys kind of became my heroes in some ways. Stephen Curtis Chapman, for you Christians out there that are watching this, he was a really good guitarist, really still is a top-notch guitarist to this day, not quite as popular. However, the point was, those guys became my heroes. And I would dress like a singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar player. That's what I would try to do, like the beanie. And I wasn't quite man enough to grow a beard yet, but I would do those things and dress that way. In fact, I had a good friend of mine that taught me how to play early on, and he would introduce me to other guitar players. And we would go meet up, and we would play guitar together, and we would learn new songs, and we would do all these incredible things. And then there would be other guitar players that were just learning that would come hang out with us, and they would come and they would learn what we know, and then they would practice, and then they may come back and teach us things, and on it goes, and on it goes, and on it goes. I was consumed by it, and I remember more than I could possibly say on here. My mother used to yell from downstairs, "Turn it down," because I'd have my guitar, my electric guitar, turn up really loud, and I'd be playing really loud, trying to be Slash or somebody like that, and it didn't work, but it was really a lot of fun, and shaped my life profoundly. So why do I tell you that? Because as we're doing this series that's talking about not going to church, for us to stop going to church, essentially all we're trying to say is that we don't want the church, or I personally don't want attendance to church on a 1-hour Sunday morning to be the pinnacle of your walk with Jesus. In fact, in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it talks about God is using anybody who is a follower of Jesus. He's using us to make His appeal to this world for the good news of Jesus, for the life, death, and burial of Jesus. And so really, I feel like our walk with Jesus should look much more like my love for guitar than it does me showing up to church one Sunday a week, or maybe every other Sunday. I mean, the average church attendance is less than every Sunday these days. And so we really want to do what we can do and explore what that could look like for us as a church to really come around and embody that. And so today, what I want to do is I just want to take a few minutes and look at, in the book of Acts chapter 2, is where we're going to land. Chapter 2 at the end, 42 to 47 is kind of where the focal verses are. And I want to look at the very first kind of encounter of the early church. It's a pretty popular verse for pastors to look at, and I think we're going to come at it from a little bit of a different angle today. But the author of Acts is a guy named Luke. Now, Luke wrote a biography of Jesus that we call a gospel, and Luke wrote that, and that was the first part of this book. And he says it this way in Acts chapter 1. This is Luke. He says, "In my former book, Theophilus, that's the guy Luke was writing to. He said, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and teach until the day he was taken up to heaven. So he wrote all about Jesus' life until the day he was taken up to heaven. And in this book of Acts that he writes, it's kind of the post side of that. It kicks off with almost the jump start of the church. And we have this day of Pentecost and the Holy Spirit comes down. I know that sounds super churchy and whatever, but it's a profound moment that I think we can learn a lot from when it comes to our walk with the Lord and what we're supposed to be and look like as a church. And I need to remind you that the church is not the building. The church, we are a people of the gospel of Jesus. There's more on that. A couple weeks ago, we'll link the previous two messages in the comments somewhere below. But it's important that we take away that the church is not a building or a service, right? That we are a people of the gospel of Jesus. So therefore, how do we respond? How do we interact with the world? How do we interact with one another? And how do we interact with Sundays? And what do we do to devote our lives to? And so I want to read Acts chapter 2. I'm going to read 42 through 47. And I want to come back and talk about a couple key ideas in there. It says it this way. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common, selling their possessions and goods. They gave to anyone as he had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily. Now, here's the cool thing. Out of the box in verse 42, it says, they devoted themselves. And I think it's important for us to look at that word devoted for just a second. Because much like it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, and they talked about fellowship, and they talked about eating meals together. There's different principles there than just simply sitting down and listening to a sermon. It says they devoted themselves to being learners of what the apostles had to share. Now, the apostles were simply the 12 disciples that had done this thing with Jesus for like 80 hours per week for the last several years. And they had watched and they had observed Jesus interact with sinners, interact with religious people, interact with leaders, interact with demons and all these different things. And they had learned from Jesus himself, they had learned about what walking this thing out looks like. And essentially they had become, I don't know, you could say experts of that world. They become experts of what Jesus had taught them. And Jesus told them, he said, listen, I want you to wait in Jerusalem. I'm going to go be with my Father. You're going to have to wait because there's this Holy Spirit's going to come. And when he comes, that's the power that you're going to need as you move forward on what I have for you in this life. And so it's important to know that when the apostles, when the disciples are learning all this stuff and they're sharing it with these people, it says these people, they weren't just listening. They weren't showing up to reason. It says they were devoted to it. So one of the markers of a follower of Jesus or a church body, period, is the fact that we want to be learners. Is that we are called to be learners. And through the Bible and through other vehicles, we can learn about the character and nature of our God. And we can learn what it means for us to walk around as a living and walking appeal for the good news of Jesus and what can happen in your life as a result of having an encounter with Him. We want to be learners. It's who we are. We gather every 7 days and we have somebody standing on a stage or sitting on a stage teaching us. We are learners. We promote spiritual disciplines like reading our Bible and spending that time in prayer. All those are vehicles for learning about the nature and the character of our God. So when he says that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, all that's saying is that they devoted themselves to becoming learners, to being learners, because the word disciple simply means learner. Now, on a different note, if you go to Matthew chapter 28 and you read in there, what you're going to see is that we're called to not just be disciples, right, to be learners. We're called to be a disciple, but we're also called to make disciples, to make other learners, right? That's kind of what we do. And so one of the other marks of the church is that we make disciples, that we make learners of the nature and character of God. And we do that collectively as a whole, but we also do that individually in each one of our own mission fields, I guess you could say. That's kind of a churchy term too. But each one of our own workspaces, wherever you work, wherever you have coffee, wherever you go to your kids' sports. I know that's a big one for me. Wherever your kids are sports, we are called to make this appeal, but we're called to make disciples in in whatever space that we're walking in. That's a mark of the church, is to be a learner. And so another thing it says they devoted themselves to was fellowship. I can't think of any more churchy of a word than fellowship. But fellowship simply means that they were committed to doing life together. They were committed to doing life with other people, even if it required things like selling your stuff. So they would offer up their lives and their stuff in service of other people. That's a big one. We're going to spend some time on that next week in kind of the phrase that we like to say around here is Christ-centered community. We're going to spend a significant amount of time just talking specifically about that, what the implications of that are, and how that's genuinely a part of what we do. But we're going to go a little bit more in depth into that. But these people were devoted to fellowship. And then they were devoted to meals, which is probably my favorite thing about this thing is because I love to eat, right? They were devoted to meals. But I need you to think about that this way, is that over a meal, it's almost like we're making a commitment, or we're committed to building relationships. Like some of the deepest conversations that I have are over a meal or over coffee, right? I mean, in fact, Jesus, he was always on his way to a meal or on his way from a meal or at a meal whenever he's doing his ministry. Like something about eating and the way God wired us, he makes it ripe for relationship building. So when he talks about they were devoted to breaking bread together, essentially they were devoted to building the necessary relationships to help other people understand and know the nature and character of our God, but also to make disciples amongst each other. Now, we're called to be devoted to learning, to be devoted learners. We want to be devoted to fellowship, which we're going to talk about next week. And we want to be devoted to building the appropriate relationships. But the question is why? At least for me. The question is, why do we want to be devoted to those things whenever there's so many other options out there? And I want to say it this way. I want to say that it matters more than I think we'll ever know this side of heaven, how we interact with the world around us. And based on the claims that we make, so if we say, yes, I'm a follower of Jesus, or I'm a Christian, however you want to say that phrase, based on that claim, it matters more than you know how you interact with the world around you. And we want to interact with the world around us in such a way that people see Jesus in everything that we do. So I'm going to leave you with that, and I want to challenge you to do this, to stop just going to church and start letting Jesus rule everything that there is to rule in your life. Let him inform everything that there is to inform in your life, how you engage people, how you love and serve people, all of the above as a follower of Jesus.